busy days in the Congress today, and after last week's deal on the debt ceiling and keeping the government running and providing relief for the Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma, now the possibility of another deal in the works over the Dreamers. Right in the middle of all of it, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from the state of Washington. Congresswoman, great to see you.
Great to see you, Bill.
Thanks so much for coming back in. So, the president wanted to have dinner with a couple of friends last night. So he said, I have two of my newest friends come on down. Chuck and Nancy. The Chuck and Nancy show. It's so funny. And
thank you very much, Nancy. Chuck, appreciate it very much.
After dinner, Chuck and Nancy said they talked about a lot of things, but they came to a rough agreement, no details, but roughly talked about a possible deal where the president would support the Dreamers Act in return for some more border security, which didn't include the wall. He said, so this morning, the president is out tweeting saying, I'm still going to go for the wall. I'm still going to, on my own, right? I'm not giving up on the wall, kind of reassuring his base, but not denying that he at least talked about the possibility of Dreamers with a little more money for border security. What do you think of that deal?
Well, I just think we have to wait and see what happens. This, everything that's unfolding is sort of
happening fast, isn't it?
How can you predict what's going to happen? How could you predict that Don, Chuck, and Nancy would be best buddies now? But I will say that it's positive, obviously, that he is ready to really push and use his influence for a DREAM Act. It sounds like Nancy and Chuck were both very clear that it had to be the DREAM Act, which is an important distinction from any other bill that's not as permanent or doesn't include as many people. And so let's see. I mean, it was very unclear what we're talking about as far as border security. And I know for immigrant rights advocates, for the progressive community more broadly, we do not want to see increased interior enforcement, increased detention beds. That would not be okay. So, and that's actually, frankly, just as distasteful as a border wall to the Dreamers as well. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. But, certainly if he sticks to it, and it sounds like he's not disavowing that was sort of what was said, then it's a positive step. Now, the next question is, what's Paul Ryan going to do? Because Paul Ryan has not embraced the deal. It doesn't sound like.
No, and I'm sure Donald Trump didn't talk to him about it ahead of time.
That's the thing. And Paul Ryan is the Speaker of the House, and so he's got to bring the bill forward. Or I do think that Trump saying what he said could give some freedom to some Republicans to sign on to the DREAM Act and the discharge petition to bring the DREAM Act to the floor. So it is possible for Trump to use his leverage and really go around Paul Ryan, but he's got to. I'm sure he's also thinking about some of the other things he wants Ryan and McConnell to do. So it's a really interesting time. And, and I think that the movement in the streets is going to be very important to keep the pressure on for a clean DREAM Act, not to trade Dreamers for some other horrible enforcement that would hurt the Dreamers' parents.
This is a Bill Press Show breaking news update.
Just about 2 or 3 minutes ago, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have issued a joint statement in response to Donald Trump's tweets. They say that his tweets are, quote, not inconsistent with the agreement reached last night. Said there was no final deal. We agreed the president would support enshrining DACA protections into law and encourage the House and Senate to act. What remains to be negotiated are the details of border security with a mutual goal of finalizing all details as soon as possible.
And that's essentially what I was saying. To me, it sounds like the deal was Trump said, yes, I want to do this. He also probably said, I'm not going to go for a border, I won't push for the border wall. But the question,
as part of this
deal. Right. But the question really is, what's the border security? Sure. And, I think remains to be seen.
Right.
He also just told pool reporters, I want to add this as well, Donald Trump did just tell pool reporters as he was boarding Air Force One en route to Florida, quote, the wall will come later.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's realized there's not going to be a wall, We can't now trade the wall, however, for more detention beds. You know, we incarcerate more people in the detention system than any other country in the world. And so I had an amendment on the floor to an appropriations bill last week or the week before that would have put a moratorium on any expansion or any new detention facilities. And actually, we held the caucus very strongly. We only lost about 5 Democrats, I think. Unfortunately, we didn't pick up any Republicans. But I think that's really part of the argument that we're making. And I will be introducing at the beginning of October a comprehensive detention reform bill that we've been working with advocates for months on that bill. So,
I read this morning that in terms of this border security, Congress has already voted this year $1 billion for more border security. So, I mean, you're right to raise the question, what are you talking about with border security?
Well,
what more are they talking about, right?
I mean, this is the thing. You know, I have asked our Homeland Security staff and committee staff to put together a diagram of how much we've spent over the last decade on border security. And not just border security, but interior enforcement.
And what did it go for, and what are we doing? Right.
Yeah, and then also, what is the corresponding line for arrivals? Because I actually don't think that those two things are tied together. It's not like you put more border security money in and you stop people from coming, because people are coming for very important reasons, like fleeing persecution or death or violence. And so it's not like just putting more border security there stops people from coming. There's some effect, of course, but the underlying problem is are the economics and the political situations in a number of these places.
So if you mentioned Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi, you know, it's interesting what Donald Trump maybe unwittingly has done. You know, it wasn't so long ago that people were writing Nancy Pelosi off, right?
Yeah.
Saying she's just not effective anymore. You can't get anything done. She's in the minority. And now it's almost like he has brought her back.
Well,
right?
she is one smart lady.
Right.
And she has been around for a long time. She knows the procedures of the House. And I've got to say, like, just watching her up close, she does know how to leverage politics. She is a progressive herself.
Yes.
But keeping a somewhat unwieldy caucus together sometimes has her, much more in the centrist camp. But at heart, I think I heard some stories about how she worked the last DREAM Act when she was Speaker to get it passed. And personally went and lobbied everybody. So, there are issues that are very near and dear to her heart. And she's certainly, there are things that perhaps we could, say we would have preferred were done differently in this whole thing. But I think there's no question to me that she's very committed to getting this passed. And
well, I'm a big friend and a huge fan. And she, there's nobody who knows the legislative process better or is better at it.
That's my feeling.
And more effective. There would be no look. Obamacare is not perfect, and I've written a book about that. But there would not be Obamacare, and thank God, Obamacare is a lot better than what we used to have. Right? Yeah. We just have to go beyond that. I think we'll get into that in just a minute. Yeah. But there would be no Obamacare without Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I mean that really is her, her big legacy. I think in getting that through, and she doesn't get credit for the DREAM Act, but she did.
DREAM Act,
I mean, she got the DREAM Act through the House. It was the Senate that was not able to get it through, and I've just seen her kind of laser focus on, yes, we're going to get this done, and I think it's very important.
So I do have to ask you. You have made a little news this week on a couple of occasions. One, let's start with your colleague, Senator Congressman Don, isn't it? Not
Don Young.
Don Young from Alaska, who wasn't happy with some comments you made on the floor of the House. And he goes off in a very condescending manner. Here he is.
You know, I rarely do this, but I'm deeply disappointed in my good lady from Washington. Doesn't know damn thing what she's talking about. And I really am disturbed. You may not know me, young lady, but I'm deeply disturbed. I am still talking.
Down his words. The gentleman has already impugned my motives by saying that I don't know a damn thing about what I'm talking about.
I didn't say damn, you said it.
He's now called me young lady, and Mr. Chairman, I ask that he take down his words.
Gentlemen will suspend.
Whoa. What is that? Did you see that coming?
I did not see that coming.
Well, good,
this was
good for you for standing up right away.
Well,
and young lady. I mean, how condescending. can you be?
and
Yeah.
you don't know a damn thing about what you're talking about. I when I was in the state Senate, the president of the Senate would actually gavel down somebody if they made inappropriate comments, and so
I thought
was
they did
waiting.
in the House too.
Well, no, apparently I've now found out, but apparently members police themselves. So unless your comments are about the president or a member of the Senate who is not there to defend themselves, it's a policing of members by members. So that's why the president of the Senate, or pro tem chairman at the time, did not gavel him down. And so, but I also was just sort of waiting to see. I was sort of in shock. Like, is this really happening? Is he really saying these things? And first the dam, then there was a piece in between where he says somebody else must have written your statement. You couldn't have possibly written your statement. And understand that this was an amendment that he offered. Let's talk about the substance here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The amendment that he offered, which would have allowed for predatory hunting practices on federal lands. And he was arguing that it was a states' rights issue. And I said it's not a states' rights issue because it's federal lands. And people from all over the country come to enjoy those federal lands in Alaska. And therefore, the federal government has the right to prohibit these predatory, really cruel and predatory hunting practices on federal lands. Alaska can do whatever they want on their state lands, but this is federal lands. And that's what he was referring to as nonsense. I actually didn't say anything incendiary. I said essentially what I just said. Yeah. And so I will tell you, though, that clip has gotten, I think we're up over 800,000 views on that clip.
Offensive, it's condescending,
offensive,
it was just obnoxious, the whole thing.
Yeah. He did apologize, which I accepted his apology. He moved for unanimous consent to strike the words from the record. I think it's important that people in Congress understand that each one of us was elected. I was elected by 750,000 people. I said to him, just like you were, somebody later said, well, actually, he's probably elected by fewer because Alaska, I think, is a much. Yeah. But this idea that you can be condescending to women, to people of color, is just because it's always been that way. It doesn't have to be that way, and I don't think we have to accept it.
You disagree with me, so therefore you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Exactly, and I think sometimes people are just intimidated when they see a strong woman speaking their mind.
I've never met the man. My whole impression of Don Young is one day, a month or so ago, a couple months, I was walking through the Capitol, and I just stopped because as I passed his office, I passed the door, I looked up, and there was this huge bear skin. Uh-huh. When you walked in, you walked right into this huge bear skin on the wall, and I thought, holy hell. And, of course, it was Don Young's office. Yeah.
Well, he did publicly apologize. I asked that he do that. He did that. And I said to him, look, we should sit down and get to know each other because, and so I'll take it as an opportunity to work with him on something. I don't know what it will be, but something down the road. So
it was sort of like from the frying pan into the fire that you went from the floor of the Congress to C-SPAN.
Actually, C-SPAN was in the morning at 7:30 or some
the same day?
hour. The same day.
Oh, my God.
In between
I got it backwards,
the floor and, in between C-SPAN in the morning and the floor at night, the Judiciary Committee Dems walked out of committee on because of a resolution that David Cicilline and I introduced, a resolution of inquiry around investigating Trump and Sessions, and Goodlatte cut off all debate and moved it to a vote without allowing any debate, which is unheard of. And so those three things all happened on the same day.
Wow. Welcome to Washington.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's go back to the morning. I've done that show many times on C-SPAN, and I usually get hammered there, but I've never been, because what's funny on C-SPAN is they have the Republican line, the Democratic line, and the Independent line.
Right.
And nobody pays any attention to that. All the right-wingers call any phone number so they can get through, right? So they'll say, now let's go to the Democratic line. I think, oh, God, finally some relief. And then it's another right-winger taking me on. But at any rate, I've been hammered there, but never as badly as you were. Here is the caller on C-SPAN.
These illegal aliens that they brought in here illegal on their own,
is costing $530 billion a year for the benefits they get, and plus $23 billion child earned income credit they're claiming on their income tax. And some of them, the kids have even living in Mexico, they've never been in there, not even kin to them.
All right, man. All these illegal aliens, all the money
John
they're
from
costing
Florida,
us.
I believe.
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
John.
I think they said his name was John.
From Florida. I must admit, Congresswoman, you kept your cool.
John, it sounds like you're in a lot of economic pain, and that is true across the country. And there's no question that we as a country need to deal with economic inequality across the country and the fact that we need to make sure we have good paying jobs for everyone. I am committed to that, and I'll tell you that right here, looking into, I can't see your face, but looking into your eyes, if you will. But I'll tell you, to blame immigrants is completely wrong.
It is something that happens at a time of economic distress, right?
Yeah.
People look for somebody to blame,
Yeah.
and for years and years it's been
immigrants. Immigrants have been a great wedge issue for this country for a very long time, and the conservative, extreme conservative right wing is very good at blaming immigrants for everything and tying everything back to immigrants. But, so much of what he said was not true. And right after I said that, I went on to sort of say, actually, there are lots of studies that show that immigrants put in more than they take. They're not eligible for public benefits. That's a myth, that they are somehow taking all these public benefits. They're not eligible for public benefits. And ultimately, immigrants have always contributed much more, have helped to build this country and always will. And so I think, what I have found, I've done this work on immigration for 20 years now. And I've been on a lot of conservative talk shows. I'm constantly facing off against these right-wing, conservative anti-immigrant groups. And I'm not always so kind to them because they have an agenda that they're pushing. That's different.
Yeah.
But with an individual, I do think we should recognize what's driving some of what they say. And I did hear a lot of economic pain in his message. He went on to talk about his kids who weren't able to get jobs. And I turned the conversation back around to, if you really want to blame somebody, blame the big corporations who are not providing jobs that pay enough these days and that are not paying their fair share, because that's really where the blame should go. And the reality is immigrants are not the ones to blame. So I've found that works over and over again. If you identify something that you truly believe with, it's not fake. I really felt what he was feeling. And you acknowledge that, and then you move to making your arguments, because it creates a lot more space for somebody to listen to you if they feel that you've listened to them. So,
Do you think there's any hope? We did talk about the possibility of a DACA deal and whatever. But I think all of us would acknowledge, I believe that we should act unilateral or independently, I guess, and get the Dreamers Act into law.
Yeah.
But still, that doesn't resolve all the problems with
we
immigration.
have a big comprehensive immigration
I was going to say, is there
reform.
any hope for a comprehensive approach to immigration?
Well, I think there is, but it's been challenging for a very long time because immigration has been used as a wedge issue. And when you polarize people around that wedge issue, it then makes it very difficult to have political space to move. I do think that there's political space to move. If you look at the history of elections, anti-immigrant candidates who have run solely on anti-immigrant platforms have not won. And so I'm actually working now.
Maybe except for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I was thinking about congressional, a lot
I
of
couldn't believe when he started his campaign.
I know.
On that very point. And I thought, coming from California, this is like a 25-year-old
argument. No, you're right. You've
right?
just thrown my argument right out. It used to be true, and since this presidential election, I think it's not true. But, I am working with a group of Republicans, new members. We all came in together, and we all want to deal with comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, these folks know that their districts depend on immigrant labor, and they want a fix not only for economics, but because their kids go to school with undocumented immigrants. Their sons and daughters sometimes are marrying folks who have immigration issues, and so they do understand both from a personal and an economic perspective that we need to fix it, and that the rhetoric is wrong.
We started talking about an unusual meeting at the White House yesterday, dinner meeting between Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the president. There was another unusual meeting yesterday during the day with Republican Senator Tim Scott, who met with the president It's a meeting he requested sometime back, right after the president's comments on Charleston, where he said there was Charlottesville. I'm sorry, some very nice people among those KKK members, and at the time, Senator Tim Scott said the president lacked moral authority if he couldn't just condemn the white supremacists. Yesterday they met. It was interesting. Tim Scott's comments to CBS News after that meeting.
I went in there not expecting to change the president's mind.
But
he's obviously reflected on what he has said, on his intentions and the perception of those comments. He was certainly very clear that the perception that he received on his comments was not exactly what he intended with those comments.
It's an interesting comment because, the perception of his comments was pretty bad, but his comments were pretty bad.
His comments were bad. I noticed the same thing. And, one thing I think we'll see, I don't think it's happened yet in the last 24 hours, but the House and the Senate passed a resolution on Charlottesville and condemning not both sides, but condemning the the KKK folks and the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis. And it passed both the House and the Senate. So now it's on the president's desk. That was a choice. I mean, they could have done it without needing the president to sign it, but they specifically structured it in a way that the president would have to sign it because they felt it was important for the president to make a statement about whether he really stands by what's in that resolution. And that's, again, bipartisan. It was unanimous in the Senate. And I think that this is an important moment to see whether he signs that. I can't imagine that he won't, but then again, who knows?
Yesterday, actually, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said that he would sign it.
Yep.
And I think that's he has to sign it.
He has to sign it.
Right.
He has to sign it. But then the question is, what else does he do? What else does he say?
He can't take back his remarks. He should take back his remarks, but he just doesn't.
And we
way.
introduced a resolution to censure him around those remarks. Jerry Nadler, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and I.
So very quickly, I just came back from the Northwest. I was in Oregon. Didn't get as far as your great state of Washington. So, what's the situation with the wildfires there?
It is an emergency. I know people don't think about it that way, but California, Oregon, and Washington, we are burning up, and this has been an issue even when I was in the state legislature. We need more money for wildfire management and relief. We need more structures in place. But ultimately, we have to deal with the issue of climate change. I mean, you cannot have all these hurricanes and natural disasters, wildfires, drought, and say that this has nothing to do with the fact that we are burning up the earth, and we need to deal with it by reining in the fossil fuel companies and moving to a renewable energy economy. And I'm proud to have introduced the 100 by 50 bill in the House, Jeff Merkley in the Senate. Raul Grijalva, Jared Polis, others. Let's get to 100% renewable energy by 2050 and start to take on this issue of climate.
That's the issue, 100% by 2050. Yeah. Which is an achievable goal.
I think it is an achievable goal.
Absolutely.
I really do.
You're making such an impact, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for taking time out of a very busy schedule to come see us.
Bill.
Thanks for all the good work you're doing.